I was standing in the middle of the living room, phone in my hand, grinning like an idiot. I had just confirmed a Saturday night date with a girl I matched with on an app, and I turned to tell Nora because that is what we did. She was standing by the sofa, one hand pressed against her chest, eyes locked on mine. The Atlanta skyline glowed through the window behind her. The vanilla candle on the kitchen counter flickered, and she said it so quietly I almost missed it. "She could never love you the way I do." I froze. The phone in my hand turned to stone, and everything between us 14 months under the same roof changed in a single sentence. Let me back up. My name is Marcus. I am 32 years old and I work as a software engineer, remote, for a fintech company based here in Atlanta. Most of my days look exactly the same. I sit at a desk in the corner of my living room with headphones on, staring at code, nursing a mug of coffee that went cold 2 hours ago because I always forget about it. That is the rhythm of my life now, and it is peaceful. But it was not always this way. 2 years before Nora moved in, I married a woman named Simone. We met at a friend's birthday party, dated for 8 months, and got married at a courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon because neither of us wanted a big wedding. 2 years of marriage, no children, no pets, just two people who were certain that love was enough without ever learning how to be patient with each other. Simone was loud where I was quiet, impulsive where I was steady, and convinced that my calmness was a form of indifference. It was not indifference. I was just built that way. She left during a business trip to Dallas, called me from the hotel room and told me she had met someone. She said she was sorry, but her voice did not sound sorry. It sounded relieved. I sat in our apartment for 3 hours after that call, staring at the wall above the television, and the only thing I remember thinking was how quiet the place felt without her. Not sad quiet, just empty, like the air had been drawn out through a crack I could not find. The divorce was clean. No assets to split, no custody battles, just paperwork and signatures and a hollow sensation like I had been holding my breath for 2 years and finally exhaled. I did not hate Simone. I was just tired of performing a version of myself that did not exist for a woman who never learned the real one. After the papers were signed, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown Atlanta, right off Peachtree Street. The second bedroom was supposed to be a home office, but I never got around to setting it up. For 6 months I lived alone. I cooked for one. I cleaned for one. I sat on a sofa too big for one person and watched television until I fell asleep, and I told myself I was healing. Maybe I was, or maybe I was just hiding behind a locked door and calling it recovery. Either way, the rent was steep, and eventually I posted a listing looking for a roommate. Nora answered the ad. She showed up on a Tuesday afternoon for what I called a roommate interview, which was really just two strangers at a kitchen table trying to decide if they could share a refrigerator. She was 28, a freelance graphic designer who had just relocated from Savannah. She carried 2 suitcases, a cardboard box of paperback books, and a vanilla candle that she placed on the kitchen counter before she had even taken a seat. I remember thinking that was a strange move, claiming space in a kitchen that was not hers yet. But she did it so naturally that I said nothing. We established rules. Whoever cooked, the other washed dishes. No overnight guests without advance notice. Sundays were quiet days. She paid rent on time every month, kept the bathroom cleaner than I ever had, and never complained about the sound of my keyboard clicking at midnight. 14 months went by. Smooth, uneventful. She became the background music of my daily life, always present, never intrusive, so consistent I forgot she had once been a complete stranger. I want to be clear. During those 14 months, I did not see Nora romantically. Not a flicker. She was my roommate, full stop. The person who left her sneakers by the door and hummed while she cooked eggs and played lo-fi music from her room just loud enough to drift through the walls. That was all she was to me, but now, sitting here telling this story, I can see every sign I missed. Nora used to light a vanilla candle on the kitchen counter before my first meeting of the day. I never asked why. I just figured she liked the smell. I had no idea she was lighting it for me. The thing about living with someone who loves you in silence is that the evidence is everywhere, but it wears the disguise of the ordinary. You do not see it because it looks like routine. It looks like habit. It looks like a person who is simply thoughtful by nature, and you tell yourself that is all it is, and you move through your day without a second thought. Nora always bought the exact brand of oat milk I preferred, the one with the blue label, even though I never once asked her to pick it up. She lined my shoes neatly by the front door every evening after I kicked them off carelessly in the hallway. She remembered that I was allergic to shrimp, and every single time we ordered takeout, every single time she placed a separate order for me without being asked, double-checking the menu for hidden shellfish. I noticed these things. Of course I did, but I filed them under roommate courtesy and kept moving. One night I was working late. A deployment had gone sideways, and I was at my keyboard until 2 in the morning trying to fix it. When I finally stumbled into the kitchen, there was a glass of water on the counter, full, condensation running down the sides. Next to it, a single vitamin, and next to that the vanilla candle still burning. Nora's door was closed. She had gone to sleep hours ago, but she had filled that glass, set out that vitamin, and left the candle lit all for me. Knowing I would drag myself out there too exhausted to take care of myself, I drank the water. I swallowed the vitamin. I blew out the candle. And I went to bed without thinking twice about any of it. That is the part that haunts me now, how many times Nora placed her love directly in front of my face, and I walked right past it on my way to something that mattered less. Over those months, I started opening up to Nora in ways I had not planned. Late at night, after the dishes were done, we would end up on opposite ends of the sofa, and I would start talking. I told her about Simone. I told her about the guilt I carried, not because the marriage failed, but because part of me was relieved when it ended. I told her about the night I signed the divorce papers alone in my car in a parking garage, overhead light buzzing, engine off, signing my name on a dotted line that erased 2 years while staring at a concrete wall. Nora listened to every word. She sat on the sofa with her legs crossed beneath her, hands resting in her lap, and she did not interrupt me once. She did not offer advice. She did not try to reframe my pain into a lesson or a silver lining. She just sat there and let me talk until I had nothing left. And when I was finally done, when I had emptied everything out onto the living room floor between us, she looked at me and said, "You didn't fail, Marcus. You just loved someone who wasn't ready to be loved right." I remember the weight lifting off my chest when she said that. I remember taking a full breath for what felt like the first time in months. But even then, even in that moment, I did not see it for what it was. I just thought she was a kind person, a good roommate, a thoughtful listener, someone who was naturally empathetic by disposition. That was all. Nothing more than that. My buddy Darnell came over one Saturday to watch a game. Nora made nachos from scratch, layered them with jalapenos and 3 kinds of cheese, brought the tray out, smiled at us, and disappeared into her room. The second her door clicked shut, Darnell looked at me and said, "Bro, that girl is in love with you. You blind?" I laughed, told him he was out of his mind. Darnell shook his head slow, like a man watching someone walk into traffic and refuse to move. He did not bring it up again. He did not need to. Here is the part I did not learn until much later. Nora did not find the apartment by accident. She saw my profile on LinkedIn through a mutual friend, a college classmate of hers, who worked at the same fintech company. She had already seen my face and read my bio before she ever responded to the listing. The apartment was not the draw. I was. The Craigslist post was simply the door she chose to walk through to get close to me, but sitting on my sofa, I had absolutely no idea. Meanwhile, I had started using dating apps. I would lie on the sofa swiping through profiles, while Nora sat at the other end with her tablet, sketching logos or editing layouts for her freelance clients. Sometimes I would tilt my phone toward her and show her a profile photo. "What do you think about this one?" I would ask, and she would glance at the screen, smile, and say something supportive. "She's cute. Go for it. You should definitely message her." And then, every single time, she would stand up, walk to her bedroom, close the door softly, and within minutes I would hear her music playing louder than usual. Not blasting, just noticeably louder, like she needed something external to fill a space inside her that my obliviousness had carved open. I never connected those two things. I should have. Any person paying the slightest bit of attention would have seen it immediately. One evening I was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through matches, and I mentioned that I had a date lined up for the coming weekend. Nora was standing at the sink washing dishes. She did not turn around. She just kept scrubbing a plate that was already clean and said, quiet as a prayer. "You deserve someone who stays, Marcus." I heard the words, but I did not hear them. Not really. I said thanks, picked up my phone, and went back to swiping. If I could go back in time and grab myself by the shoulders, I would. There was one night, though, that something shifted inside me, even if I could not name it or hold it still long enough to understand. The power went out across the entire neighborhood. No lights, no television, no Wi-Fi, no hum of the refrigerator. Just silence and darkness, and the two of us. Nora and I ended up sitting on the living room floor, with the vanilla candle between us, the only light in the apartment. Rain was hammering the windows so hard the glass trembled. The city skyline beyond the pane was half dark, half glowing, and the whole world felt smaller than usual. For the first time, Nora talked about her father. His name was Harold. He was a carpenter in Savannah, a quiet, steady man who worked with his hands for over 30 years. Building furniture for churches and community centers all across Chatham County. He never raised his voice, never rushed. Nora said she used to sit in his workshop after school, perched on a wooden stool in the corner, watching him sand a tabletop or plane a piece of oak for hours without speaking a single word. Neither of them said a word. They just existed together in the sawdust and the silence, and she told me those afternoons were the safest she had ever felt in her life. He died of lung cancer when she was 23. She was holding his hand when he went, and the last thing he did was squeeze her fingers twice. Then she said, "He was the quietest man I ever knew, and the safest." And she looked right at me when she said that last part. Dead center. The candlelight caught her eyes, and the rain was driving against the glass, and the whole apartment smelled like vanilla and storm water, and I felt something move inside my chest that I could not explain, but I let it pass. I told myself it was the weather, the intimacy of a dark room, the closeness that happens when two people are sitting on a floor with nowhere else to go. I told myself it was nothing. It was everything. 6 weeks before the night Nora spoke those words in the living room, my phone rang. It was Simone. I had not heard her voice in over a year, and the sound of it hit me like walking into a room I thought I had bolted shut. Her tone was soft, apologetic. She said she had been doing a lot of thinking. She said she had made a terrible mistake and she missed what we had, and she wanted to meet for coffee. Every rational part of me screamed no, but curiosity speaks louder than wisdom, and I agreed. We met at a cafe in Buckhead on a Thursday morning. Simone arrived 15 minutes late, perfume so heavy I could taste it before she sat down. She talked before her chair was even under her. She told me about her new job, her apartment in Sandy Springs, her therapist, her spin class, her 5-year plan. She talked about herself for nearly 45 minutes before she finally circled back to the reason we were there. She wanted to try again. She said people change. She said she had grown. She said the man in Dallas was a mistake, a detour, and now she was ready to be the partner I deserved. I sat across from her with my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and the entire time, and the only thought in my head, was how profoundly different this felt from the conversations I had with Nora on the sofa at midnight. With Simone, every exchange was a performance rehearsed, calculated, shaped to land a specific way. With Nora, every conversation was a resting place, a quiet room with the door left open, and no expectation to perform. I told Simone I needed time to think about it. She smiled like she had already closed the deal. I drove home in silence with the radio off. When I walked through the front door, Nora was in the kitchen chopping onions, and the vanilla candle was glowing on the counter the way it always did. She did not ask where I had been. She did not ask who I had seen. She just glanced up and said, "Dinner's almost ready." But I noticed something. Her hands were moving slower than usual. She was cutting those onions like each one weighed 10 pounds, and her jaw was set in a way I had never seen before. I sat at the kitchen table and watched her, and I could not name what I was feeling, but something in my chest was pulling hard in 2 directions at once, and neither direction made sense to me. 2 weeks later, Simone showed up at the apartment without warning. I was in my bedroom when the doorbell rang. Nora answered it. When I came out into the hallway, the two of them were standing in the doorway, Simone in heels and a tailored blazer, full face of makeup, gold earrings catching the hall light. Nora, in a faded sweatshirt and bare feet, hair pulled back in a loose knot. Simone looked Nora up and down, slow and deliberate, the way you examine something you have already decided is beneath you. Then she said, "Who is this?" I said, "My roommate." Simone let out a short laugh through her nose, the kind that is not a laugh at all, and stepped inside without being invited. She stayed for 2 hours. She sat on the sofa and laid out her entire vision for our future like she was pitching a venture capitalist. New apartment together. Weekend trips to Hilton Head. Maybe a dog. Her voice filled every corner of the room. I sat across from her and listened, and the entire time, Nora stayed in the kitchen, silent as a shadow, wiping the same section of counter in slow circles. When Simone finally left, her perfume lingered in the apartment like a stain. I found Nora standing by the stove, staring at the candle on the counter. The flame had died. She looked at it and said quietly, "Your candle went out. I'll light a new one." That was all she said. She did not ask about Simone. She did not ask about the future that had been blueprinted for the past 2 hours. She simply struck a match, relit the flame, and walked to her room without another word. Then Simone did what Simone always did best. She turned information into a weapon. Somehow she found out about the mutual friend. She dug through social media, pieced together the timeline, and realized that Nora had known who I was before she ever responded to the Craigslist posting. She called me late on a Wednesday night, her voice dripping with cold satisfaction like honey laced with something sharp. "She's been lying to you from day one, Marcus. She moved in because she's obsessed with you. That's not a roommate. That's a stalker." I stood in the hallway with my back pressed against the wall and felt the space close in around me. Not because I believed Simone, I knew her well enough to know she would bend any truth until it snapped clean in half if it served her purpose. But the seed had been planted, and seeds do not need to be true to grow. I started replaying every single moment with Nora, the oat milk, the vitamins at 2 in the morning, the candle burning through the night, the way she listened without interrupting, the way she looked straight at me during the blackout when she talked about her father. And I could not tell anymore which parts were genuine affection and which parts were part of some quiet design I had never seen coming. That doubt was worse than any accusation Simone could hurl, because it did not just attack Nora. It attacked every good, warm, safe thing I had felt in her presence. I went home that night and did not turn on the living room light. I sat in the dark on the sofa, the Atlanta skyline casting long blue-white shadows across the hardwood floor. After a while, Nora came out of her room. She saw my face and stopped in the hallway. Her hand gripped the doorframe. She knew something had shifted. I could see it in the way her shoulders dropped and her breath caught in her throat. I looked at her and asked it straight. "Did you know who I was before you moved in?" She did not blink. She did not flinch. She stood there for a silence that felt like it lasted the length of my entire adult life. And then she nodded. One small, quiet nod. I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. I did not yell. I did not slam anything. I just looked at her, then looked away, walked into my room, and closed the door. That night, for the first time in 14 months, the apartment did not smell like vanilla. Nora had not lit the candle, and I hated the absence of that scent more than I was willing to admit to myself. I began avoiding her after that. I could not look at her without the doubt crawling in. I timed my trips to the kitchen for when I heard her bedroom door close. I wore my headphones even when no music was playing. The candle sat on the counter, cold and unlit, for 3 consecutive days. The apartment grew cold in a way that had nothing to do with the thermostat, and for the first time in 14 months, I realized how much of what I called home had actually been her all along. 3 days passed. 3 days of a silence so dense it had weight and texture you could feel pressing against your skin. Nora left for work before the sun came up and came home long after it set. Through the thin wall between our bedrooms, I heard the sounds of her dismantling her life in that apartment, drawers sliding open and shut, zippers pulling across fabric, tape stretching and tearing over cardboard. She was packing. She was getting ready to leave, and I did nothing to stop her because I did not know what to say, and saying the wrong thing felt worse than saying nothing at all. I moved through those 3 days on autopilot. I worked. I ate food I could not taste. I slept in short, shallow stretches that left me more tired than when I closed my eyes. But every single time I walked past the kitchen counter and saw the empty spot where the candle used to sit, something inside me cracked a little wider. I kept hearing Simone's voice in my head: stalker, obsessed, liar, and then, louder, I kept hearing Nora's, "You didn't fail, Marcus." I kept picturing the glass of water, sitting on the counter at 2 in the morning, with the vitamin beside it, and the candle still burning for me long after she had gone to sleep. I kept feeling the warmth of the mug she handed me during the blackout, her fingers brushing mine through the ceramic for just a fraction of a second. On the third night, I sat alone in the living room with the lights off, staring at the bare countertop, and I asked myself the only question that actually mattered. Was any of it fake? The answer came fast, from somewhere deeper than logic or reason. No, not a single moment of it. The fact that Nora knew my name before she walked through the front door did not erase 14 months of her showing up for me every single day without once being asked. It did not cancel the water glass. It did not cancel the vitamin. It did not undo the silence we shared sitting on the floor during the blackout while rain hammered the windows. It did not undo the sentence that healed something inside me. You didn't fail, Marcus. Knowing that someone exists before you meet them is not a crime. Loving someone quietly for over a year and never once demanding anything in return is not manipulation. It is devotion, and I had been punishing her for that devotion because a woman who abandoned me was threatened by a woman who chose to stay. I sat with that answer for a long time. The apartment was dark around me, and the counter was bare, and the silence was enormous. Then I stood up from the sofa. I walked down the hallway to Nora's bedroom door. I knocked twice. She opened it slowly. Her eyes were red and swollen. Behind her, 2 suitcases stood zipped and upright on the floor like sentinels. On the bed, lying on its side on top of a folded gray sweater, sat a single vanilla candle, unlit. She had kept it. Even now, while packing every other belonging into boxes, she had kept that one candle out. I said, "You should have told me." She said, "I know, but if I told you, you would have looked at me differently from day one, and I needed you to know me as just Nora first." The silence between us was not empty. It was full to the ceiling, with everything neither of us had spoken for 14 months. Every candle she lit that I never questioned. Every night she turned her music up because I was showing her dating profiles of other women. Every carton of oat milk she bought that she never drank herself. All of it lived in that silence, and for the first time, I could hear every word it had been trying to say. Then I said, "I do know you as just Nora. That's the problem, because just Nora is the best person in this apartment." Her eyes filled. She pressed her lips together hard and gripped the doorframe like it was the only thing holding her upright. She did not cry. She just looked at me like she had been waiting for a very long time for permission to breathe. I stepped past her into the room. I picked up the candle from the bed. I carried it through the hallway, past the sofa, into the kitchen. I placed it on the counter, right in the center, exactly where it had always sat. I struck a match. The flame caught and held steady. Vanilla hit the air instantly, spreading through the room like a breath that had been held far too long, and the entire apartment seemed to exhale around me. Nora was standing in her doorway, watching from across the apartment. I turned, looked at her, and said one word: "Unpack." She did not move for several seconds. Then she slowly turned around, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a suitcase zipper opening, that small, sharp metallic rip cutting through the silence like a declaration. It was the loudest, most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my life. Her voice came from inside the room, steady but thin as thread. "I didn't move in to trick you, Marcus. I moved in because I'd already seen enough to know you were worth being close to. The rest, I couldn't plan." I did not answer. I just stood in the kitchen with my hand resting on the counter next to the candle, watching the flame settle into its steady rhythm, breathing in that familiar sweetness that I had taken for granted for so long, and for the first time in 3 days, the apartment smelled like home again. Nothing dramatic happened after that night, and I think that is exactly the point. There was no sweeping kiss in the doorway, no tearful declaration in the rain, no soundtrack swelling in the background. We simply went back to being Marcus and Nora in a 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown Atlanta. Except now there was a door open between us that had been shut for 14 months, and neither of us was pretending it did not exist. The first week, the only thing that changed was time. Our dinners stretched longer. We stopped eating on the sofa in front of the television and started sitting across from each other at the kitchen table with the candle glowing between us. Nora did not disappear into her room after the meal anymore. She stayed. I stayed. We talked until 11 o'clock, then midnight, then 1 in the morning, the candle melting slowly down to a pool of wax while neither of us noticed. We talked about ordinary things, a documentary she had watched, a stubborn bug in my code that took me 4 hours to find, a new restaurant she wanted to try in East Atlanta Village, and somehow those small, unremarkable conversations felt larger and more meaningful than any exchange I had ever had with anyone in my life. In the second month, Nora did something that changed everything all over again. She took me to Savannah. She drove us down on a Saturday morning with the windows cracked open and a playlist she had made filling the car with songs I had never heard before but immediately wanted on repeat. We stopped at her mother's house, first a small yellow bungalow on a tree-lined street with a creaking porch swing and wind chimes made of sea glass that caught the light and scattered it across the front steps. Her mother, a woman named Diane with silver hair cropped short and Nora's exact same green eyes, hugged me at the front door before I could even finish introducing myself. She held on for a beat longer than a stranger's hug should last, and when she pulled back, she looked at me with an expression that said she already knew the whole story and had been waiting for this visit. Then Nora drove us to the cemetery. We walked along a gravel path shaded by live oaks draped in Spanish moss until we reached a simple granite headstone set back from the path beneath the widest tree. Harold James Whitfield, beloved father. No grand monuments, no bronze plaques, just a stone, a name, and a bed of white flowers that someone was still carefully tending. Nora stood beside me with her hands clasped in front of her and said, "He would have liked you. You too have the same silence." That single sentence rearranged something deep inside me. I understood then, fully and permanently, why Nora had chosen me. Not because of my LinkedIn profile or my face or my job title. She chose me because I reminded her of the safest person she had ever known in her life. And I decided right there, standing in the warm afternoon light in front of a man I would never have the chance to meet, that I would spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that comparison. A few weeks later, Simone sent one last message. It arrived on a Tuesday evening, a long, sprawling block of text, bitter and accusatory, filled with the particular kind of cruelty that only comes from someone who has realized too late that they threw away something valuable. I read it once, sitting at my desk while Nora sketched quietly in the next room. Then I deleted it without typing a single word in response. I blocked her number. I closed that chapter of my life permanently. I never mentioned the message to Nora. But later that same afternoon, she walked past my desk on her way to the kitchen, and without slowing her pace, she placed her hand on my shoulder for exactly 1 second. One brief, warm second. Then she kept walking. She did not ask what was wrong. She did not need to. That single touch carried an entire conversation between us. "I am here. I know something happened. You do not have to carry it by yourself. It is over now." That 1 second was enough. That was more than enough. Our first kiss happened 4 months after the night of the confession. It took place in the kitchen, because of course it did. That room had been the center of everything between us. From the very first day she set a candle on the counter. I was standing at the sink washing dishes. Nora was behind me wiping down the table. She walked past me toward the counter to put something away, and she stopped, just stopped mid-step and turned to look at me. No words, no signal. I shut off the faucet. I dried my hands slowly on the towel draped over my shoulder. I turned around, and I kissed her slow, soft, careful, tasting of vanilla and dish soap, and something I had been too stubborn and too blind to recognize for over a year. Neither of us spoke a single word afterward. We just stood in the kitchen with our foreheads touching, the candle flickering beside us on the counter, and the entire world contracted down to the 2 square feet of tile beneath our bare feet. No fireworks, no dramatic music. Just 2 people finally admitting what that kitchen had known about them for 14 months. A year later, we were still in the same apartment. Nora had moved her things into my bedroom, and her old room had become her design studio drafting table, positioned by the window to catch the morning light, color swatches and typography samples pinned to a corkboard on the wall, and a fresh vanilla candle burning on the windowsill whenever she worked. The kitchen counter still held its candle in the same familiar spot, but now 2 coffee mugs sat beside it every morning instead of 1. I did not transform into a different person. I did not have some grand awakening that rebuilt me from the ground up. I simply opened my eyes and finally saw what had been standing right beside me for 14 months, patient, steady, quiet, asking for nothing, and offering everything. Darnell came by one evening. Nora and I were on the sofa, her legs draped across my lap, my hand resting on her ankle, a movie playing on the screen that neither of us was actually watching. He walked through the front door, took one long look at the two of us, and broke into the widest grin I have ever seen on another human being's face. "Told you, bro," he said, shaking his head and laughing. "Told you." I laughed right back, and this time, I did not tell him he was crazy. Sometimes I think about how close I came to missing all of it. If Simone had never made that phone call, Nora might never have been pushed to the edge of saying what she had been holding inside for over a year. If Nora had never spoken those words in the living room, I might still be swiping through faces on a screen while the best person I have ever known sat 3 feet away on the other end of the sofa, sketching quietly and loving me in a language I was too foolish to learn. The people who change your life do not always arrive with a speech or a spotlight. Sometimes they arrive with 2 suitcases and a vanilla candle, and they set it on your kitchen counter before they have even sat down, and they light it for you every single morning without once asking for anything in return. Nora did not move in to trick me. She moved in to be close to something she believed in, and the craziest part of this entire story is that she was right. I hold nothing against Simone. If she had not walked out that door, Nora would never have walked in. Every person in your story serves a purpose, even the ones who hurt you, especially those ones. Simone showed me what love looks like when it is loud and empty. Nora showed me what love looks like when it is quiet and full. The candle on our counter has been burning for 2 years now. Different wicks, same flame. Have you ever had someone in your life who loved you quietly and you almost missed it? If Nora hadn't confessed that night, do you think I would have ever figured it out on my own? If this story hit you somewhere, like, share, subscribe. Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've got your own story about the one who was right there all along, I want to hear it.